Hello and welcome. I'm Jonathan Beale, and this is the ASB Investment Podcast, a show that keeps you up to date on the market and helps you make smart choices with your investments. From a big investment company in the States to a little recording studio in Auckland, welcome to Glen Booraem from Vanguard, who's here to share some wisdom from his 30 years working for one of the world's largest asset managers. We'll be chatting with Glen about stewardship and advocating for good governance, and how Vanguard goes into bat for our customers by engaging with companies and exercising our voting rights as shareholders. These are entirely our own views. It's not investment advice, but we know plenty of experts at ASB that'll be happy to chat if you need. So it's lovely to be in the booth again, and we're joined by Glen from Vanguard. Welcome, Glen. First time in the booth?
Great to be here. First time in New Zealand.
First time in New Zealand. Wow, we'll come back to that. And we've got John Smith here as well. So, John, this is probably your third time, I think.
Third time now,
Third time. So you're a bit of a seasoned practitioner now.
I am a bit now, yeah. No, not quite as nervous as I was the first time.
Okay, so Glen, maybe it's awesome to have you here from the States, and I sort of would love to think you came here specially for the podcast, but I know that's not quite true. But maybe just tell us a little bit about Glen and yourself and what you do at Vanguard.
Sure. So I've been at Vanguard now for 30 years, so a little more than 30 years now. Joined right out of college, and moved through a number of roles at Vanguard. I mean, today serve as the fund's investment stewardship officer, and we'll talk about what that means in broader terms, but have been in that role in parts for the last almost 20 years. So have a wide range of experience. It's been amazing to see how the stewardship landscape has evolved over that time, and it's in a great place. I think it's got great places to go, but it's a really important role as we think about our role to take a stand for all investors, treat them fairly, and give them the best chance for investment success. It's so core to what we do, and investment stewardship is so closely aligned with that.
Great. And you've been you're based in the head office in Vanguard?
Yeah, head office of Vanguard outside Philadelphia on the east coast of the U.S.
Wow. Yeah, John and I were there,
2.5 years ago? Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
We got the train.
The train from Grand Central Station in New York down to Philadelphia. Yeah, well, awesome train station, that one.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, really
beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah.
There was that famous Harrison Ford movie, I think, Witness.
Yep.
I think they filmed a bit of it there, and sort of Pennsylvania and all around there. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I saw Witness on my first date with my wife.
Really? Yep. Wow. That's awesome. But when we arrived in Philadelphia, we walked out, and I think it was pouring with rain, if I remember.
Yeah.
And I went up to the taxi and said, here we're going to Vanguard in Malvern, I think it is. Malvern?
Yep, Malvern.
Yep. Malvern, and the taxi driver goes, I've never heard of it. And we go, well, they're one of the largest fund managers in the world. I've never heard of them. And so I got my phone out and put Vanguard head office Google Maps, and he followed Google Maps on my phone to take us to this enormous building. It's like a campus, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a beautiful college campus type setting out in the suburbs. It's a great environment.
Wow. And how many people would work there in the head office?
So we've got 18,000 people globally. In Pennsylvania, probably about 12,000 of those on campus and in the general vicinity.
Wow. Okay. And so, John, maybe this a good starting point would be to maybe talk a little bit about ASB's relationship with Vanguard and what they do for us on a larger scale.
Sure. So ASB's had a relationship with Vanguard for well over a decade, and it's been through a couple of iterations, but the current iteration of our relationship with Vanguard is that Vanguard manages our Australasian equity index portfolio. It's about $3.5 billion. It's a significant portion of the assets that we have, and it's a really, really important role. Vanguard's one of the managers that we use, and we use a number of managers, each of them experts in their field, as Vanguard is, and we really enjoy the sort of insights that we get from Vanguard and the other managers that we use. They're all, as Vanguard is, just really large global players who have huge amounts of insights and value that they can add to us outside of simply the managing of the portfolios.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about Vanguard as well is it's like the keys to the castle, isn't it? That you can actually, there's other things that we can, not just about managing the money, other things that we can learn and work together on.
Well, we're going to be going away on another a research trip again, and we'll be going to see Vanguard and getting their latest insights into some of the problems we're trying to solve for at the moment to try and get better outcomes for our customers. So it's great to have partners like Vanguard and and to be able to draw upon the skills and expertise that they have in areas like stewardship. We certainly couldn't put the sort of resources that Vanguard puts into this sort of area into it ourselves, but by partnering with large organisation like Vanguard, that we can get these sorts of outcomes, the stewardship outcome, from them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, that's probably a great segue to maybe start talking about stewardship. So maybe let's start really high level. So how would you describe stewardship and in a few sort of sentences?
Yeah, and investment stewardship for us is the way in which we can serve as the voice for investors to promote good governance that creates long-term shareholder value. At the end of the day, the reason we're in this business is to create long-term value for our 30 million clients around the globe. And advocating for good governance that translates into longer-term value for those portfolio companies is a core component of that.
And is this like something new, or has stewardship been around for a while?
Stewardship's been around for a while, but has certainly evolved over an extended period of time. I've spent about the last 20 of my 30 years at Vanguard involved in one form or another in our governance and stewardship activities, which started out earlier very much focused on proxy voting. So voting at the annual shareholder meetings of thousands of companies around the globe. And as that broader governance ecosystem has evolved, there's much more attention to engagement, one-on-one dialogue with portfolio companies that in our position as an index fund manager, we're going to own forever. So we certainly have votes at every shareholder meeting, but we also have the opportunity to engage in dialogue with those companies over an extended period of time, to go deep into the weeds on issues, advocate for those things which we believe will add longer-term value for those end investors, and continue that discussion over time.
It's a really interesting point, the index point, because there's often this challenge that we hear about index managers sort of like lazy, don't really care, aren't really engaged with, it's really
passive.
Just a lazy, very passive.
Yeah.
Passive is the word, right? Passive, we don't do much, right? But your point you made is that we're long-term shareholders in these companies, and we're not passive at all through the stewardship approach. We're not passive at all. We're actually very active in terms of the way we're engaging and influencing these companies, as we should be, because we're a long-term shareholder.
Yeah, passive investors are by no means passive owners.
Yeah.
And the work we do on the stewardship front is really evidence of that.
Yeah, and there's a correlation between good governance and good financial outcomes. Is that
absolutely? That's the core belief on which all of our stewardship work is based.
Yeah.
We believe that well-governed companies will perform better over the long term. There's not a thing we can do on the stewardship front to help our index fund managers track the index any better.
Yeah.
But if by promoting better governance across the board, we can move that distribution of performance just a little bit to the right, when you extrapolate that incremental gain across trillions of dollars, that translates into real money in real people's pockets over time.
And it's sort of common sense, though, isn't it? Like a well-run, well-governed, forward-thinking business is going to actually make more money, and then at the end of the day, it's going to help customers grow their money to what they want to achieve.
Well, there's good examples that I'm sure many of our customers listening to this might be able to think about in the New Zealand environment. Just some of our biggest companies more recently have challenges with governance, which have led to significant losses of value.
Absolutely.
And it's very easy to see that connection.
Exactly. Now, so tell us a little bit about, so you run the stewardess team. How big's that team, and what sort of, are you globally based, or how does that work?
Today the team stands north of 30 crew, based on our nautical heritage. We talk about our employees as
We might need to
crew.
mention that. So people aren't called staff, they're called crew. Okay.
Our crew members.
Crew
and
members.
the name Vanguard, right, is after, is it
one of Lord Nelson's
flagship,
fleet.
wasn't it?
Yep,
Cool.
his flagship.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've about
So you're the captain, or?
No. We have 30-plus crew today globally, located primarily in our headquarters outside Philadelphia, but we do have do have a team of 5 based in London covering our fund's European portfolio companies. But across the board, our team, wherever they're located, has a global focus. We want to make sure we're evaluating and voting and engaging with those companies across the globe. 13,000 companies in just about every market around the globe, focused on a range of different activities. The first of those, very central to the voting and engagement work we do, analyzing the underlying issues, understanding companies' disclosure, other research to inform our perspective so that we can vote and engage on an informed basis. We also have a part of our team that's focused on research and communications to be able to articulate those things that we're doing and why we're doing them to our clients. So our annual stewardship report and other periodic commentary helps to contextualize the work we're doing and put it in the context and show how it's evolving over time. And then finally, we have a data and operations team that helps us source and analyze this huge volume of data on these 13,000 companies to better inform our decision-making, track our engagements over time so that we can monitor progress and assess impact over time.
And when you say engagement, what do you actually mean by that? Are you not just voting at annual meetings, actually there's further engagement with boards and organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. There's really 3 channels through which we work. The voting at those 13,000 companies on an annual basis is probably the most visible, and that's really where we started. My earlier days in this role, we had a couple people tucked into the corner of our fund accounting department, following our proxy voting guidelines. Very, very deliberate and analytical work. Over time, as I said, we've evolved to this team of 30. Voting is still important. It's a very important channel for us to express our perspective to companies. However, over time, a big chunk of that work that has evolved into engagement or dialogue on a one-to-one basis with portfolio companies, which enables us to go deep into the weeds on issues that are important. It enables us to have that discussion in shades of gray, whereas by the time something goes to a vote at a shareholder meeting, on the ballot we have this binary black and white choice between for and against, where through the engagement process and the dialogue we're able to have with both management and the board, we can have that discussion at shades of gray and develop our understanding, articulate our perspectives, but also understand the board's perspective and the company's perspective, all with the intent of moving that governance process in the right direction over time.
So I understand that in many ways you treat the vote as it's a bit of a blunt instrument and almost a last resort to vote against a company on a particular matter. What the ideal perspective would be to be engaging with the company on a particular issue and to have the company in a positive engagement shift their policies in that direction. And if they're doing that, then you're supportive of the company's management. But if you're not getting that positive engagement, then potentially the vote is essentially the final way you can influence them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's an important distinction in 2 respects. One is, to your point, starting with engagement enables us to go deeper into the issue before we resort to opposition to management or support for a shareholder proposition. But it also enables us to put a broader range of issues on the table. We're not constrained to just what happens to be on the ballot at a particular point in time, but we can look across the spectrum of all of the areas that we focus on through all of our advocacy engagement and voting activities and target those where there's a gap or an opportunity for improvement.
And how welcoming are companies that say, Glen phones up from Vanguard, hi, can I come? Are they open to the conversation, or is that a challenge even to start the conversation?
Yeah, no, today companies are increasingly accessible and responsive to engagement. There's been an evolution over time, but more and more as we reach out, boards are expecting our call. Part of that I think is driven by our and other investors' communication of our perspectives on governance to the market. So, it's important, we believe, for companies to understand where they may be outliers from the expectations of their investors, and whether that's outliers from an underperformance standpoint or outliers from a governance expectation standpoint. And many more are open to that discussion over time, so that we can have that dialogue and move things in the direction of shareholders' interests.
And what do you think has driven the change of being sort of a bit sort of skeptical and to now being much more open about the engagement process?
I think there have been a lot of things. The first has been it's no longer new. Yeah. I think engagement in the earlier days was the exception rather than the rule. And a lot of engagement in those earlier days came as the follow-up to votes against management, because there wasn't necessarily an open channel or an open dialogue. But now I think as more and more companies have seen the positive impact of engagement to either themselves or to other companies, they're more receptive. And it's become the expectation. The accessibility and our ability to engage in that dialogue is a fundamental expectation.
I think that there's another shift that's going on there, and that is that the realization of the boards, perhaps, that it's not just financial performance that the investors are now interested in. That the financial outcomes are important, but investors are interested in other things as well.
Yeah.
And that particularly social and environmental matters are really coming to be really, really quite important to those investors, and that reputation of companies is quite important as well. So, is that part of what's happening as well?
Well, I think that is a piece of it. From our perspective, the reason those things are relevant is because over an extended period of time, things that might otherwise be considered under the environmental or social umbrella do have an impact on long-term performance. Over the long term, we believe that the interests of multiple stakeholders will converge with the interests of shareholders. And so it's not an either or, it's an and in terms of, what the range of issues we think about. But it all comes back from our perspective as we think about ESG. For us, ESG begins with G.
Yeah.
Right. It's the board's role in governing the environmental and social risks that they may face, being responsive to feedback they get from the market and the impact that has on their value over time as their strategy and the expectations of the market evolve. Because it is an evolutionary process here, whether it's the evolution of company strategy, the evolution of the shareholder base, the expectations on the governance front evolving in a consistent direction over time. All of those things ultimately converge over the long term, in our view, with additive value to end investors.
Yeah. Now, ASB have moved to, we've been around 172 years, very sort of community heritage focused, customer focused, but have moved to more of a purpose. What's ASB's purpose? Which is sort of quite new to us here at ASB, which is, I think, the right way of being thinking about, now, what are we actually here to do? Have you seen that in globally companies start to really think about actually, yes, there's about the shareholder, but what is why is this organization here, and actually what are we trying to deliver for the longer term? Is that like a theme you've seen over the last few years?
Yeah, I think it's, and it shows up in a couple of different ways. One is this shift from shorter term to longer term focus, and companies doing a better job or being asked to do a better job to tell their long-term story. Help us understand, help all of your investors and stakeholders understand how you will create value that is sustainable over the long term. Especially for us on the index side, who will be practically permanent owners before, longer than any of us are in our current roles. So linking that long-term strategy to the value creation story. But at the same time, on the corporate purpose side, you see groups like the Business Roundtable in the U.S. just in the last couple of months articulating their view, and this is a group of CEOs in the U.S. Articulating their view that companies' purpose should include the interests of not just stockholders, but other stakeholders. And I think, that's very much aligned with our perspective that over the long term, which is what we believe matters, the interests of all of those stakeholders will converge. And, I said it before, but it's not it's not an either or, it's an and. So, each of us have a stake in the long-term outcome, and aligning them both through a strategy and a sense of purpose is a fundamental part.
Fantastic. And so what are some of the themes that you're talking to boards about at the moment? There's a lot of focus at ASB around diversity and inclusion and stuff. What sort of things are you talking to boards about?
Yeah, so at the highest level, there are 4 basic pillars of our governance approach, or of our stewardship approach. And that focuses on the composition of the board of directors. And among our 4 pillars, that's really a first among equals. If we, or in most instances, if the board gets itself right from a composition standpoint, other things are far more likely to fall into place. And certainly no guarantees.
So what would a good composition look like?
Sure. So from a board composition standpoint, we're looking for a collection of capabilities and a diverse set of perspectives that are aligned with the company's long-term strategy. Experience, background, diversity on multiple dimensions, gender, age, race, ethnicity, national origin, all with the objective of informing the board's perspective from multiple directions. Because we know that both through experience and research that diverse groups make better decisions. So diversity for us is not a social issue, it's a governance issue, and has that direct linkage to long-term value creation. And that's been one of the areas, diversity in the boardroom's been one of the areas that we've spent a lot of time focusing on over the last couple of years. First on the gender front. And there's been a global focus on gender diversity in the boardroom that's actually driven progress. In our most recent investment stewardship report this year, we've tried to broaden that perspective to be more holistic, include multiple dimensions beyond gender, and ask companies to provide more disclosure about their approach to diversity in the boardroom, the outcomes, their succession management process, how they source diverse candidates from a broader pool, and ultimately making progress over time. So that's been, a core area of focus in that most important pillar. The 3 other pillars we focus on, the first are shareholder rights, ensuring that we and other shareholders have an appropriate ability to affect change over time. It really serves as a safety valve for us to be able to intervene.
As an example on that one, just give us an example of where of types of structures where that doesn't quite work. I mean, the one springs to mind, which is somebody like Facebook, has got a shareholder structure which is not ideal.
Yeah. So, equal voting rights for shareholders is one core component of that. So ultimately, we believe companies should get to a one share, one vote environment. We know that we're on a journey on that front, but ultimately having a linkage between economic value and voting influence is an important piece. Annual election of directors, which isn't a global norm on a market by market basis, but it is a channel through which we believe shareholders can hold the appropriate board members accountable on an annual basis. Not that we expect to spill an entire board just because we have annual voting rights, but having that form of accountability are a couple of things on the governance front. The other one of the other pillars is executive compensation or remuneration and its linkage to long-term value creation. So making sure there's an alignment between remuneration and relative performance versus peers in the market. Right? We want the best performing companies to be those that are most highly compensated and the worst performing companies not to be. So having that directional alignment over time, we believe sets the right incentives for senior leadership. And then the final pillar there is the board's role in overseeing risk and strategy. So both working with management to set the company strategy, hold management accountable for execution against that strategy over the long term, but very importantly to understand, oversee, and disclose the material risks that strategy either faces or creates in the market. So focusing on disclosure and oversight there. So we understand the board's role in overseeing this material risk that has an impact on shareholder value, and then disclosing that risk so the market can be the judge in terms of the impact on value. From an index fund perspective, we're essentially price takers. We're in the market when we need to be based on client cash flow. So it's important to us that the market sets the right price all the time. And that's linked very closely back to ensuring that all of those risks and opportunities are disclosed.
Obviously, with your accent, you're from America, yeah, and you're here in beautiful New Zealand. And I think you were in Australia before you came here, just for a stopover. And so, but obviously, the stewardship extends into Australia and New Zealand.
Yep.
Are you having much engagement with sort of organizations in Australia and New Zealand? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, our objective is to engage with our portfolio companies and other market participants across the globe, and that's increasingly extended beyond the U.S. As I mentioned earlier, we've recently, established a team in London. Again, that certainly doesn't cover Australia and New Zealand, but it gives us broader access to our global portfolio. And as part of our portfolio of engagements over time and on the radar, significant coverage over time in both Australia and New Zealand. They're important parts of the portfolio of companies in which we invest in, making sure that we're connected to the most important issues and the companies with the most significant impact on our portfolios is really important.
And I suppose John knows this better than me because he's from New Zealand, but New Zealand have a rich heritage of leading the way in like strong themes around diversity, women's votes, nuclear power, all those types of things. You could learn probably a lot from New Zealand in the stewardship field, I would have thought.
Oh, we were the first to give the vote to a woman.
Yeah.
And then, the stand we took on nuclear weapons and things. Yeah, absolutely. New Zealand has often been leading, and of course our Prime Minister's leading in many areas at the moment.
And you think about the awful Christchurch shootings and the way that the industry reacted to that. Well, it's a good example of stewardship, I suppose.
It's a fantastic example of engagement. For some reason, the Christchurch shootings resounded around the world in ways that many of the mass shootings in the United States never did. And certainly off the back of that, we've got a massive engagement exercise that's going on at the moment, which is led by the New Zealand Super Fund. I think every New Zealand fund manager, us included, is involved in that, and actually a large number of global fund managers have joined in on that. I think the last time I read the communication, there was nearly 13 trillion New Zealand dollars at least of funds under management that was supporting that engagement, which is directly with Facebook and the other social media companies. And in relation to the things that they did and the failings that they had in relation to that shooting event, and that's a very, very specific example of engagement, and I think they're making a difference. If companies around the world are seeing that happening and the fact that can happen. And, with Facebook, then, they'll pay a lot more attention to the engagements they have with Vanguard because they know that potential's there anywhere.
I think it's a really strong message, though, about engagement, because the alternative is sell the share, don't have a say, don't engage, just go, someone else will sort it out, and it's not a worry, which actually it's a very blinkered view, isn't it? And actually being able to actually say and be part of changing something is a much more positive way of approaching it.
Well, certainly divestment is a blunt instrument, and it's not a tool in our box from an index fund perspective. Yeah. And as we think about divestment as a channel, one, it's generally not an option for us if we want to track the indexes that our clients have asked us to track. But if you think about it, by divesting from a stock, you're almost by definition putting it in the hands of someone who cares less about the underlying issue than you do. You're giving up your voice at the table on the issue, and you're really having very little impact on the company. Right, it's not the company that has to buy your shares back. You're selling them in the secondary market. So, on a number of on a number of dimensions, this idea of divestment as a solution to some problems, I think is overstated. And I think having that continuing voice at the table, whether it's in the case of governance failings or compensation, remuneration issues, broader governance issues, diversity in the boardroom issues, having that channel of direct engagement with the company to articulate a very defined perspective on the issue. Again, not the blunt instrument of either only voting or ultimately divesting, but having a dialogue. And especially for us, we have a recurring vote at every shareholder meeting. We have a recurring opportunity to engage in that dialogue with companies over time, set our expectations, expect them to hear the expectations of their other investors. A very important part of our perspective is we are but one voice at the table, and we expect companies to listen to us and their other investors and stakeholders and make a decision. But then help us understand how they're implementing whatever change they're implementing.
Exactly.
So it's that perspective and context over time that's a really important part, at least for us, from the engagement process.
Might just touch on one subject before we wrap up. And ASB have recently launched the Positive Impact Fund, which is in partnership with Vanguard, which is awesome. But I suppose, and we're seeing more and more customers get much more interested in that type of investing and making a positive social or environmental impact. Climate risk, is that something that your team are talking to boards around the world with? It must be one of the top topics, isn't it?
Absolutely. In that pillar that I described earlier of oversight of risk and strategy, engaging with companies on climate risk and climate risk disclosure is one of the key areas of focus right now and over the last couple of years. Over the last year alone, actually each of the last 2 years, we've engaged with more than 200 companies in each year on their disclosure of the impact of climate risk on their long-term performance.
Sure.
So, a core topic in that oversight of risk and strategy lane for us.
And it's very topical today because I think lots of school children aren't at school today.
Yes.
They're on strike and stuff.
Yes.
And at the same time, the Green Party have come up with this. I think it's a really good idea of getting potentially 16-year-olds to vote in New Zealand.
Yeah, so Greta Thunberg gives her speech at the United Nations, and she's 16, and so now we want 16-year-olds to vote in New Zealand, and we've got all of the school children on the road, all about climate change, and actually a lot of adults and a number of companies have shut down to support that as well. So it's a really interesting and very, very big social theme and a real theme.
Just to say a really massive thank you, Glenn. I wore my special US T-shirt for the event, but I know you had been in New Zealand for less than 24 hours, and you're heading home tonight. So safe travels.
Thank you very much.
Back to the good old US of A, and next time, please come and spend a little bit longer with us. We really welcome you back. Thank you very much, Glenn, and thanks, of course, John, for you back in the booth. Thanks very much.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us today on the ASB Investment Podcast. If you have any thoughts on today's episode, or if there's anything you'd like us to discuss on future shows, please fire your suggestions through to podcasts@asb.co.nz.